Hello and welcome to the Unleash podcast, brought to you by Embrace the Power, Unleash Your Potential, Make Your Impact. I'm your host, Amy Lee Miller. And before I introduce our fabulous guest today, I just want to say a quick shout out and thank you to our affiliates, Planetary Design. Definitely check them out for some great gifts to satisfy all of your coffee needs. And now we can jump in. I am so excited to welcome to the show today our guest, Mathieu Flamant. Welcome, Mathieu. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It is always such a fun pleasure to talk with you. Congratulations first on a stellar career. You are a multiple-time award-winning sales leader in the diagnostic space, first women's health, and now oncology. So many successful years in medical sales. And I was looking at your background, and just looking at your background, your resume, you have the perfect example of career progression, starting your career in medical sales, business development, sales training, and then now sales leadership, and then multiple promotions. So I'm curious what you attribute that success to. Is it your passion specifically for the space, or maybe something deeper that drives you personally to keep challenging yourself and leveling up in your career?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I think one of the biggest things is passion here in my career, working in women's health and in oncology. It's we get to help people better their lives. In the women's health, we're helping bring in new life, and in oncology, we're helping save lives. So my passion is really helping patients and helping patients live a better life. Now, when it comes to personal development, my passion here at work is my biggest passion is seeing people grow and develop. I get the biggest joy out of watching somebody start their career, help them grow and develop in their career, put a plan together, and then see them really achieve all their goals. It's my biggest joy is when somebody gets promoted, somebody wins a President's Club, somebody gets one of their goals that they've always been dreaming for. That's what really drives me personally.
That's beautiful. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing. I can imagine you're such a great leader just in knowing you personally and working with you and in just listening to how you talk about your team. I imagine your team absolutely loves you. I know leadership, of course, comes with its challenges. I like to do a lot of research on different personalities and improving my communication skills with different kinds of personalities. As a leader, you're leading, of course, all different kinds of folks and that have different drivers and different challenges. And I'm wondering if as a leader, do you find that there's an effective way to lead folks that maybe you're not clicking with, or maybe you don't have a connection with, or maybe you don't find that? I mean, maybe you have a way of connecting with everyone, or maybe that's also part of making sure that you hire folks that you connect with. But I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, sometimes you get you take over a team. It's not the people you always hire, or sometimes I have a great relationship with most of my team, if not all of my team. But there are those challenging cases that maybe they might not get along with you as much in the beginning. I like to treat all my reps, though, or all my teammates the same. I give them the same plan. Now, everybody could be managed differently because there's a lot of different personalities. But I like to treat them the same. One of the things that I really like to do with them is sit down and discuss their vision and their goals, and then really put a plan for their vision and their goals. A lot of times I find out that, some of their goals, sometimes they won't have goals. Sometimes the goals are just what the company gives them. So sitting down and really listening to what their goals are, I think one of the biggest things is we as leaders need to do, and sometimes forget to do, is invest the time in the reps themselves or in your teammates themselves. And that's one of the biggest things is have a process sit down with those people, sit down with your teammates, and get to know what they want. What drives them? What is important for them? What are their goals? What are their needs? When you sit down, even with those teammates that aren't as don't like you as much in the beginning, once you sit down, get to know them a little bit better, help them build a plan towards their goals, give them a plan of action, give them something to track their results. You start to see that, okay, you can build that trust with that person.
Absolutely. Do you find that I love that you talked about in the beginning, really finding out what their goals are. Do you find, or do you work to establish, or are you focusing on their personal goals as well, and figuring out a way to align, kind of connect their professional goals along with their personal goals to try to tie in what drives them?
Oh, 100%. A lot of the times I find that sometimes they'll just have their business goals. That's their only goal that they have. They've never thought about their personal goals. It's really fun when you sit down with them and talk about, hey, what's your personal? What would you like to do? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? We ask, it's a classic question you ask when you're interviewing, especially when we're younger in our careers. Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Right.
I thought it was always more interesting when I was 22 years old. I'm like, I hope still here at the company or get promoted.
Uh-huh.
But now it's like, I like to ask that question after they're here already, and really finding out, where do you really see yourself in 5 years? Not what is the scripted answer you want to give me on an interview. It's like, tell me more about yourself and what you really want to do. Interesting, because I'll revisit this a few times in a year, or maybe once yearly. What depends on the person. But it's funny how things change with certain people when you first talk to them about it, and then after a 6-month checkup or about a year, you revisit that question, and they might have totally different goals or different areas that they want to explore. So it's always good to check in to find what they're really looking for, and it's such a great way to build a relationship with your team, because it's showing that you're interested in investing in your team, and that's what I've found that they usually strive on and do well with.
I love that. I've definitely been asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years in an interview process? But I don't know that I've been asked that question by my direct manager in the past once I've been in the role. And that, I think, is a really good point, because it happened for me even recently. We might be headed down one path, and then a new goal comes in. You get further along, and then wherever you are in your path can introduce a new idea, something that you wouldn't have thought of previously without that experience leading up to it. So that's really key. It sounds like a great way to stay connected with your team.
It's definitely, I just recently did it, and it was so great. One of my teammates no longer wants to go on one track, has decided to go on a totally different track. And once we sat down and broke down why, it actually made more sense to go the different track that she's interested in. And this was something she was like, we talked about this last year, Matthew, and I said, yeah, like, and here we are again. And she's like, I'm glad you brought it up again this year, because I was a little nervous telling you I wanted to kind of change my whole entire track. And I was like, I asked her why she was nervous, and she's like, because I thought you just wanted me to go one way. I'm like, this isn't about me. This is about you. So let's get the growth. Let's get you going to where you want to go. And we sat down for 3 hours, and she raved about it. And still, we built a very, very, very nice track for her, and it helped morale with her. It helped morale with the team. But also it builds that trust, and that's what I think is most important, is building that trust with your team.
Yep.
So that you can grow together.
I love that, growing together as a team. That's so important. I've been on teams in the past where there is that cohesiveness, and you feel comfortable and you feel excited to get together and see everyone. And then I've been on teams where it didn't really mesh. The personalities didn't really mesh. And I think looking back, it was maybe because it was more, I don't know if individualized is the right word, but each person was more about themselves. And, so I haven't been a rep for a long time now. I've been working for myself for a long time now. But looking back, if I were a rep, knowing with what I know now with the coaching and the additional experience that I've gained, I know what I'm good at, and I know the areas that I am not good at. And it helps to further your success faster when you can be very self-aware, because you can save so much time. So if I had to go back and do it again, the point that I'm not that strong in, I would go find a rep on the team that is strong in that and say, hey, can you teach me how to do this? Or can you walk me through quickly how you do this? So I can spend maybe an hour or 30 minutes with that person and come away with a playbook rather than trying to reinvent the wheel myself. So I'm just curious how you mentioned that, building morale with the team and strengthening the team. Are there other methods that you use to bring everybody together and help each other kind of play off their strengths and supposed weaknesses so that everybody is really coming together as a team?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do that a lot, especially with my team. We love my biggest strength is building the team where everybody's is going in the right direction, and it's not always easy. It starts with getting out to meet your team. In our world, and we're in the medical sales world, just getting out to meet your team. Don't be. A lot of the times we're on Zoom meetings or we go to these national meetings, and so it's spending the time with the reps, finding out what drives them. Also,
Yep.
getting the teams together and getting them together to have fun. It's not always about work. Yes, we need to work. We all have a goal. We have goals. We have to achieve our goals. We understand that. But it's getting them to get to know each other on personal levels, doing fun games. Last year, we did a wine tasting and some axe throwing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Hopefully not together.
Yeah, no, they weren't together, but actually it was at the same place, and they had us do the axe throwing first, and then the wine tasting
Okay.
afterwards.
Very smart.
But those were fun team building events, and being involved in the team building events, right? I also am a firm, strong believer in breaking bread with your team. Go have meals with the team.
Yeah.
If your companies allow you to, if you can take out their families for dinners one night, if you meet the spouses and the children of your team, it builds a different bond. Now, some companies don't allow that. I get that.
Sure.
But then try and do things that it's not always work for the team. They got to realize that you got their back, and you're not always about business. It's also, let's have some fun together. Let's grow as a team together. We're actually doing a team event soon, and we're going to be doing. We have a meeting in New Orleans, and we're going to be doing a food tour, a walking food tour of New Orleans. So,
what a great place to do a food tour. That sounds so fun.
So it's like, I think, being with the team, meeting with them one-on-one, and getting everybody to meet together can really, build a powerful bond with everybody. And then, like you said earlier too, reach out to others as well on the team. And I encourage people on our team to reach out to others.
Yeah.
If somebody has a strength, call them. Don't just give them the answers every time. Have them reach out to each other, and then delegate some of the teammates to be leaders of something, or the pros at something, or the person that's like, hey, come talk to this person about this situation, and they'll be able to help you. I think all those factors lead to a successful team.
I love that. That's so good. Sharing some of the leadership responsibilities, really empowering your team while not at the same time, not overwhelming yourself, so that you can be there for everybody. I think that's awesome. Something I wanted to go back to that, just in leadership and in building out your teams, I'm curious when it comes to hiring, one of the most challenging probably and most important facets of your role as a leader. If you find, and maybe you found both cases, but I'm curious if you find one or the other, what is a better predictor of future success of a candidate? Is it their experience on their resume, their background, or your gut instinct throughout the process with that candidate?
I giggled a little bit because I think throughout my career it's changed. When I was younger in my management career, I relied more on my gut. And then Now I rely more on both. I think both are very important. There's
Mm-hmm.
certain things you can look at in a resume that are key outliers in a good way. You're like, okay, does this person have, President's Club wins, or, how long have they been with certain companies? Have they been successful? And then, the gut's always there too. One of the biggest things for the interview process that I've learned that's really important, that I think is really important, is actually having a process and
Absolutely. So key. Uh-huh.
sticking to that process. Um, Amy, I'll tell you this. During COVID, we kind of changed our processes a little bit because the interviews were on Zoom or
Mm-hmm.
over the phone. And in medical sales, one of the big things is getting out and meeting the people, and doing live interviews was totally different over Zoom, because you can't see body language. You
Mm-hmm.
can't see how the person's, reacting when you give them an uncomfortable question. And
Mm-hmm.
so we got away from the process a little bit during COVID, and it was I accept full blame on that. I had to change. I didn't change well enough, and so we're getting back to the original process now. So having a process, um, we always like to say, and you know this, hire slow. There's a classic saying: hire slow and fire fast.
Right.
The goal is not to fire anybody ever.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So the goal is, then let's hire slow, but let's hire the right way. It doesn't have to be slow, but do it the right way. Have a process
Yeah.
and get the process. Stick to your process. And my advice to people who don't have a process: ask the people around you who have experience what their
Mm-hmm.
process is, because um, in the beginning, when I first got into management, I thought I knew everything, and I didn't. And then I started asking more people for advice on what's their process is,
Mm-hmm.
how did they hire, um, read books on it if you're a reader. If not, listen to podcasts on it. But
Mm-hmm.
get yourself a process. It's well worth it, because if you hire, the more effective you hire, the more positive results you'll have, the happier your team you'll have, and the more successful you'll be.
Absolutely. And that is so key that you mentioned process. And that process and sticking to it is just as much a benefit to the candidate as well. Sometimes it can feel like it's dragging out and they're on pins and needles and they want to move forward. And there's always hiccups in the interviewing process with scheduling conflicts and things like that come up, holidays. But also I like to say that the interview process is like dating. It's supposed to be a process that builds, because you want that as so the candidate, the more interest, the more touch points they have with the manager, the team, and the company, the more invested they're going to be. So, I think as a leader, it's not necessarily realistic to expect the candidate to come to the first interview, maybe being an in-person interview and having a business plan and everything in place, because then you want to think about, well, does this individual really have their priorities aligned? They don't know enough to invest this much. So first, I think it's great to have a phone interview first. I know a lot of folks like to do Zoom interviews first. Actually, do you find maybe it's folks are getting more comfortable with it now with Zoom because we have so much more experience with it now since COVID? But initially, candidates, I would hear feedback that, they're uncomfortable hopping on Zoom for the first time. So I'm wondering if you find that maybe candidates are not as much themselves on a Zoom interview as they would be if maybe there were a phone interview first, where you've built some rapport, and then, okay, you're both invested, and then you're ready to kind of take it to the next step.
I found now that people are just so used to Zoom because
Mm-hmm.
of what the last 3 years. So it was interesting in the beginning because people weren't used to it,
Yeah.
they would get nervous and fidgety. Now they're almost pros at it.
Yep.
Actually, we did an interview last week, and it was a live interview at lunch, and it was a get to know, the light, fun one, and it was so different, and it was so much more personable.
What do you mean? Just in-person interview?
We did an
Okay.
in-person interview, and it was
Okay.
so funny how it was so much different than the Zoom interviews, because
Yeah.
it was more interactive. It was more laughter involved, which is always fun.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think doing the first interviews, if you go to the phone interview or Zoom, uh, if I'm going to do a phone or a Zoom, it's just, that's part of, like you said, that process, like dating.
Yeah.
That's going to be one or two in the step of 8 or 9 steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so What I found now is that people are such pros on Zoom that they're used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting them back out of Zoom and into the real world more. That's been more exciting lately.
Yeah, definitely exciting I think it's so important to meet in person and interact because again, for the candidate too, making, just as much as a hiring decision is super important from the leaders. And it's also, making a career change is really, high key for the candidate too. So having those touch points helps them to assess along the way too if this is going to be a really good fit or if it's not going to be a good fit. So I love that you have a solid process in place, and I love that you said if you don't have a process in place, reach out to those who do. And in addition to asking what is working, ask what hasn't worked, so you can maybe learn from others' mistakes and avoid them yourselves. What do you find to be the most challenging piece of the hiring process?
So, man, that's a great question. The hardest part in sales is, so we talk a lot about it here at our company. We talk a lot about skill versus will. I've found in the 8 years of doing interviews that the hardest part for me and the most challenging is teasing out the will. We can teach people skills. We can teach people how to sell. We have great sales processes. We have great sales training. And then you can talk to the people and learn all their skills. You can see it on the resume. You can discuss what their skills are and how they refine them. What's hardest for me, and I've had a lot of discussion about this, and so for your viewers, if anybody wants to reach out, I'd love to hear from them, is how do you tease out the will? How do you know, in medical sales, you work from your home. You work out in the field. You're going out to see doctors daily. There's no, calling in at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning. There's no checking in. There's no logging on. You log on to your systems, but I'm not going to check that. So you have a lot of freedom and autonomy here to do whatever you like. And so, and I'm trusting that you're going to work, just like we trust that we all go to work.
Mm-hmm.
But the hardest part is, everybody says they work very, very hard. Everybody says, I hustle, I'm a go-getter. And there's a number of questions you can ask, but I found still that, do they have the will, the drive? Everybody says, oh, I've won these awards, but, it's only when I see them in person or once they get in the company, you find out, do they really have the will that they said they did?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been the hardest, most challenging for me, is how to really tease out if they have the skill, it's there, we can tease that out. How do you really find out if somebody's got the will?
During the interview process. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I'm glad that you shared that because you answered one of my questions, which is, what are some of the skills that you can teach a rep or employee once they're on board versus those that you can't teach. I'm thinking, not that you're asking for my advice, but now just my brain is kind of circulating. And I always like to ask this question too during interviews. I want to know about not just a professional wins, but also a personal win. What's something a challenge that you overcame in your personal life, or an achievement that you're really proud of in your personal life, and how did you get there? Because how we do anything is how we do everything. And I think examples of both can really help paint that picture. And also, I like to ask when I'm interviewing candidates, specifically if I'm not getting enough information from my questions, if it's not a flowing conversation and I just still feel like I'm not getting enough, maybe they haven't opened up. I like to ask, what drives you? I find that it helps people, it brings people present because they're not expecting the question, except for now, if you're watching this, you'll expect the question. I don't always ask that, but also I'm curious. I genuinely want to know what drives you. And I think that, sometimes when we're feeling unmotivated, it's not that we're not motivated people. It's that we're not driven to do what it is that we're focusing on. So maybe if you're, in a sales role, or when working with a team, kind of thinking how that might, if there are certain, in finding out what drives and motivates your team, maybe giving them that specific responsibility. Because I find, so let's say we're in a job, because I do some career coaching as well. Let's say we're in a job that doesn't light us up. I find when we take an hour or two a day to focus on what does light us up, then we're just more motivated all around.
It's so interesting you say that. It's like, well, we talk about this a lot on our team. It's like, what drives you, what makes you happy, especially like what motivates you, right? There's a lot of things, like people can get in ruts, for example. People, they or somebody does so well and all of a sudden they're not doing well, and then they're like, what's going on? So we always say, I love to tell people, take a break, especially if if you have vacation time, take some vacation. We need to. We get so bogged down in the numbers sometimes. We get so bogged down on having to reach our goals that we gotta take a break and take care of ourselves a little. Other things are, get a routine. Routines are great. We fall out of routines very fast because our world is chaotic, and life. I have 2 children and 4 dogs, so life takes over. But and then other things. Read books. If people don't read books, then listen to podcasts. If you don't listen to books, but try and learn. We're always trying to get, like, I want people to learn. I've got a new thing for the team. It's for each person. Like, if they're stuck in something, or if they're not motivated, we'll sit down with them, and then I'll find out like a book for them if they like books, right? Some people don't like books, that's fine. But if they want a book, I'll ask around and say, hey, for people, all my friends and my coworkers, and say, hey, I have this person, they're looking for something. Is there a book you recommend? And we'll find something for them to recommend them. But it's tough when you're in a rut too, because you want to get out of that rut. Last thing is, like, reflect on why you do these things. That's what is your why, is what we like to talk about a lot here. Reflect on your why. Why are you doing this? Why do you like, what's your motivation, and why do you do it? Is it my motivation is my family? Like, there's nothing more important to me in the world than my family. And you met my daughter, one of my daughters, before. She's been on a number of our calls before.
I love her. She's awesome. You're a great dad. I can tell.
So, and then also, one thing I want to say is, if people are in a rut or in a bad place, find out what your trigger is. Identify what your trigger is. What's getting you in a bad place, and then say, okay, how can I manage that trigger? If there is if it's a certain person, maybe have a talk with them. If it's something that you're doing every day, maybe switch that trigger. Get away from that trigger. We usually, when we can find out what our triggers are, if you do a little self-reflection and say, oh, that's what's bothering me. Could be your spouse, could be your children. These things happen, right? Reflect on it, see if you can manage it a different way, and then you'll be in a lot better place.
That is so good. All of that stuff is so great. I love everything that you just shared there. Even starting with just taking a break. Just sometimes when I have learned, and this has been so useful, because I'm usually super motivated, on fire most days, but I also have those times where I'm having a downtime, and maybe I'm just really tired and I need to get some extra rest, or maybe something is bothering me. Self-reflection, absolutely. It's so key to dig deeper and get curious about what it is that's bothering you, because once we isolate the problem, then the solution shows up. And oftentimes we don't want to do the uncomfortable part of sitting with the discomfort and really looking right at the problem. And the easy way to do that, well, easy, but not without challenge, is to dig deeper, get curious about what the trigger is and why is the trigger there. And then you can, usually the solution presents itself. But yeah, sometimes just, I'll just go to bed super early if I'm just, not feeling motivated or tired, or I'm just having not a great day. It's such it's a great tool to just be easy on yourself, give yourself, some rest. And I love that you said routine. A routine, just by starting the day with a healthy, positive routine. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes. That's, starting the day by controlling what you do have control over. And if you give that time to yourself, then the rest of the day is going to unfold much more likely down the right side of the domino effect. And if it starts to, something triggering happens, well, you can more easily course correct because you started your day, in that positive way. So all great stuff. I love that you're sharing all of these methods and concepts with your team, because they're not only going to help them in their career, but also in personal life too.
I'm a firm believer. My wife will tell you this, that in every positive, in every negative, there's a positive. So with everything bad, something good comes out of it.
Yep.
So self-reflection, if you lose a deal, if you don't, if something bad happened, look at those failures. If you had a bad call, if you had sit back, say what happened, go over, replay it in your mind, talk it out with somebody, and then find out what you did wrong and learn from your mistakes. We all make
100%.
mistakes.
Yeah.
I make hundreds of them daily. I know, but it's like sitting back, reflecting, and saying, okay, what could I have done better? I mean, again, with every negative comes a positive. You just got to find that positive, and doing a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit of talking it out. You can find out, okay, next time I'm going to do this much better, and here's the reason why, and you'll see the results. They come fast and furious, and it's a lot more fun that way too.
Absolutely. And then it's not a mistake because you learned from it. We only have, I really don't believe in mistakes because sometimes maybe we go in one direction to learn another that, oh, this wasn't, not that it wasn't the right direction, that those experiences led us to what is the right direction. And yeah, learning from the choices, I like to say choices that led to undesired outcomes are not mistakes when we learn from them, because then we build ourselves up, and it's through that process that we become equipped to later make our greatest impact. If we just jump to what it is we wanted without all the stuff in between, what do we have to offer, once we get there? And I was going to ask you all of these things that you shared organically. Perfect. This kind of leads into a question which you sort of kind of answered, but I still want to ask because there's so much talk about and probably for a long time now on success and failure. And I talk a lot about success, not so much failure, because of what I just shared. I tend to not really believe in failure or mistakes other than inaction, which is, typically due to fear. But I'd love to hear your perspective on failure.
I love, like, failure. It just means just means I haven't done it right yet, right? So
Yes, so good, so good.
it's failure. It's like mistakes. They're opportunities to get it done right the next time. And so just as much as success is great, you need failures to be successful. Otherwise, you won't be successful, because if it comes too easily, then a failure will happen and it will destroy you.
Yeah.
So when you have to, we grow up, you make so many mistakes in life. What do? If you learn from mistakes, that's when you're growing. When you're not learning from them, it's going to take you to bad places. So I always look at failure as just a new opportunity to grow. So
Absolutely.
It's like, where did I go wrong? What could I do differently? And then I love to discuss it with as many people as I can that are in my trusted, circle. I call it like having a board of directors. So I have
I love that.
my own personal board of directors.
Nice.
And from senior leadership at our company to other companies to friends to my wife, and just like, hey, here's what I did wrong. Here's what happened. I'd love to get your feedback on that. Help me understand where you think I might have gone wrong, and then maybe we can put the puzzle together. And it's like, what can I do from those mistakes? What did I learn, and how can I improve from those? Failure just means you haven't got it right yet.
Yep. I love that. That's so good. And awareness is the first step in creating change. So we can be easy on ourselves first, with the self-reflection. If it's in the past, some of the emotion, the unpleasant emotion around the mistake has passed. So we can explore it, a little bit easier, but just becoming aware of the actual problem and our responsibility our actions that contributed to that by taking responsibility there. That's so empowering to then create change. I was listening to Brian Tracy. He's my new guy I'm listening to. He's phenomenal. Maybe I'll link down below one of his videos, but he was talking about, I'm not going to quote him exactly because I don't have it right, but failing at something 1,000 times is not failing. It's just learning 1,000 ways that didn't work.
I love that.
So then you're, getting closer and closer to what does work. Awesome. Mathieu, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It has been really, really great having you. I always also selfishly enjoy any time spent in your energy. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And again, for your listeners, if anybody has a way to tease out the will, obviously I like, asking their why what drives them, as you said earlier, but I'd love to hear some more.
Absolutely. Tell our viewers, how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to connect?
Yes, my email address is mflamant, so it's MFLAMANT mflamant@yahoo.com.
mflamant@yahoo.com. MFLAMANT at Yahoo.
That's correct.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Well, can't wait to have you back. Also, a quick thank you to our listeners. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate you. And remember to like and subscribe to Embrace the Power for more educational, inspiring interviews with Vince Buggs and Mike G, and also Dr. Jennifer Blaylock. She's got a great show, Aspire to Inspire. I think I have that right. And if you are a hiring manager and you are looking for some ways to improve your hiring strategies, I invite you to check out my book, Ready, Set, Recruit, The Hiring Manager's Guide to Recruiting with Confidence. That is available on Amazon. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. And until then, stay curious.